All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for providing your information in the chat box. We really appreciate it. I am Professor Alejo. I'm from the Department of History and Political Science here at St. Xavier University, and we are very, very proud and excited to welcome Tom Tresser. Before we get started and before I turn things over and introduce Tom Tresser, I do want to mention one more time, thank you to Regina, Angela, Carrington, Monica, and Lupe, who have been integral parts of organizing and putting this event together. We have wonderful students here at St. Xavier University, and they are just an example of that. So thank you. Thank you very much. And we want to also thank Tom Tresser. Thank you, Tom, for joining us today. Tom Tresser is an educator, an organizer, and a creativity champion. He is a public defender and a fighter for against privatization. He's been doing civic work and grassroots democracy work for over 40 years in the area and beyond, correct, Tom?
That's right.
And he has done a variety of different kinds of workshops, including the politics of creativity, which is a call for arts services organizations across 6 states. He also teaches a variety of courses on art, creativity, and civic engagement at Loyola, at the School of the Art Institute at IIT in DePaul, and First IC Stars. Tom has also published a web-based project called America Needs You, which is all about the need for artists to get involved in politics. We are extremely excited to welcome him here today to talk about civic engagement with us and really get at the heart of what it means to participate in our communities and beyond. So thank you, Tom. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me just say this about everyone on the call. This is a beautiful day, one of the first beautiful days we've had in a while, and the fact that you're all taking your beautiful afternoons off to join us to talk about one of my favorite subjects, democracy, is a really tribute to you and to Professor Alejo. So thank you, because in my world, leadership starts by showing up. So you all have shown up. So give yourselves big rounds of applause, big thumbs up, heart emojis, put it in the chat, shout out in the chat for yourselves. So I call myself a civic educator and public defender, and I've been active in democracy work in Chicago since 1990. I started and operate something called the Civic Lab, which is a nonprofit community-facing do tank dedicated to accelerating and deepening work around civic engagement, grassroots democracy, government accountability, and social justice. We're sort of like a tool maker, tool shed, schoolhouse, laboratory, research institute, and fun house. We seek to expand civic imagination about what is possible for Chicago's future, and we hope and help to recruit, develop, equip, and inform new leaders like you to take us to that future. Our mantra is investigate, fabricate, educate, activate, liberate, and repeat. Here comes my commercial. We have published a book called Chicago is Not Broke, Funding the City We Deserve. It's a slim volume written by local experts, short articles that outline revenue solutions, progressive and sustainable revenue solutions that total $5 billion for the city of Chicago. And for a limited time, if you go to that link that's in the chat and buy the book for $15 plus some tax and shipping, we will take $5 off if you use the promo code STX. So that's my commercial. Hope you take advantage of it. All right, let's talk about civics. So how are we going to spend our time together? We're going to first have a general discussion about what is civic engagement. And then we're going to really dig deep through some small group work, which we'll explain in a minute. So we really want to get your brains going. Each of the small groups will have a student facilitator from St. Xavier, so they will introduce themselves. After the small group work, we will have report back from each of the small groups. So someone in each of those groups, it doesn't have to be the student leader, should be the reporter to tell us what you have come up with in your small groups. And you'll be using the Jamboard. Whoa, Jamboards from Google. So that'll be explained to you by the time we get to that part of the agenda. Then, after the report backs, we're going to talk about civic metrics. Civic metrics. And then lastly, building your civic muscles based on what we've talked about today, and then we shall adjourn. All right. Let's get into it. First of all, what is civic engagement? Feel free to unmute yourself and throw into the chat whatever comes to your mind. I say civic engagement, you say what?
Participation.
Participation. Put it in the chat.
Questioning your government.
Questioning government. Put it into chat. Great. I love it. What else? Engaging. That's good. Engaging in change work. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Taking action. Research. Excellent. Advocacy. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of action words. I love that. That's serving. Oh, service. Awesome word. Yes, campaigning. Again, very active words. Protesting. Absolutely. Yes. The work that we're going to talk about here is not quiet work. Sometimes it is, but often it is not. Speaking out against something that you do not agree with. Yes, sir, Liam, that is a great one. Speaking out, having your voice, you know. Do we get a feeling in America that some people have been silenced and that some people, we don't want to hear from them, right? So part of this is to make sure everyone has a voice. Challenging the status quo. Yes.
Lobbying for causes.
Lobbying, that's a good one. Put it in there. Whoever said that, lobbying. Yes, so the lobbying is a specific kind of engagement because you're acting towards usually office holders, people who are in office, who are writing laws. So that's usually what lobbying means. So yes, that's a very important manner of engagement. Voting and helping. Yeah, so that's two different things. Voting happens like usually every 2 years, but the helping part, that can be all the time. And it can be very different kinds of help. Absolutely. Public concern. Yeah, concern. So again, there's another word there that's very important in this, and that is the word public. So I invite you to noodle on that. What is public? Think about that for a minute. Public means what? Public is what? Community, yes. Public is what? So you're going to school, open to all, yes. So something that affects everyone, that's good, accessible, that's great. These are super points, you all, available to all. So your school, St. Xavier, is not a public school. It's not free to go to, correct? You're paying tuition, or perhaps you have a scholarship there. But the point is, many schools that might be in Chicago require you to pay a fee. So that's not a public thing. What are examples of public? So anyone can throw into the chat or say out loud, examples of public. Examples of public. Yeah, so public library. Yes, education, right.
Open space,
Open
sidewalks.
Space. Yes, parks and open space. Put it in the chat, please. Excellent. And the first one that someone put in there, Tony put in public library. That's very meaningful to me because I grew up in New York City and by a single mom. She was a school teacher. We didn't have a lot of money. And I was in the public library all the time. You know, the librarian would see me coming, right? And she said, "Oh, here's that Tresser kid. I know he likes pirate books, so I better give him a pirate book." You know, so the public parks, huge, huge. I love our parks in Chicago. Streets, the public way. Like, how do you even get someplace? You get on a public. What do you ride on this public street to get somewhere?
How
Public
about our public buildings?
transportation. Yes. All right.
How about our public buildings, Tom, where we go for city and civic and
Yes.
and those things?
Yes, put that in the chat. Public services, public places, like you would go to City Hall or to the public clinic, even maybe. Things operated by the city, you know, public buildings. Yeah. So right now under COVID, it's very present, isn't it, across America and in Chicago? Like, what is the public sector doing for us? Is the government providing us enough PPEs? Are they guiding us even with good information, like public health? Someone should put that in there. Public health. If that's not the #1 crisis in America right now, I don't know what is. So you can judge the former administration under President Trump versus the present administration under President Biden on how America is doing handling this public health crisis. And honestly, it's not something that one city can handle, right? It's not something one company can handle or one, even one school. No, it's not possible. That's where the word public becomes so important. All right, you guys have got a great handle on this. This is a great way to start our conversation. You've already queued up a couple of the things that we're going to talk about now in the meat of our time together. So I'm dealing with a very civically astute group of people. So here's what we're going to do now. We're going to go into small groups. And your assignment when you're in your small group will be to tackle and to cogitate on one of these 3 things, or sometimes I call them civic buckets. And this is what I mean by that. At the Civic Lab, when we talk about civic engagement, to make it and to break it down, we say there are 3 big buckets to this work. The first is, what is your civic appetite or your civic heart? That is to say, what is your disposition? What do you need? What needs to be in your heart or your mindset to do this civic work? So that's what groups 1 and 4 will be reflecting on. Then the second bucket is facts, or you see like the little head, the civic head, or sometimes you see like a little idea light bulb. Sometimes I use that icon. But the question here is, what should you know? What kinds of things should you know in order to be a great civic actor, a powerful civic engager? What kind of stuff? Now you're all in, well, most of you are all in college right now, but probably the others who are not engaged in college were in school at some point. And so this idea of intentionally learning stuff is not strange to you. But what stuff should you know in this realm? Okay, that's what groups 2 and 5 will be thinking about. And then the third bucket is your muscle, like your skill set. What should you be able to do to be a good player in the civic space? And so these are activities, actions, things that you do. And some of these were referenced already in the chat. So you're already kind of heading in that direction. And groups 3 and 6, if we need them, we'll be doing that. Now, here's the fun part. We're going to be using Jamboards. Yes. So you'll see in the chat in a minute a link to this space that we have set up for you. It's a Google tool called a Jamboard. Maybe some of you have used it already. There's one Jamboard for each of the groups. So you want to make sure that once you're in your small group, you may have to have 2 screens on your computer, one to see the small group and the other to go to the Jamboard. And you'll see there are the Jamboards up at the top, are numbered 1 to 9. Go to the Jamboard assigned to your group. And that's where we want you to play. We want you to put your insights up on the Jamboard with the little sticky notes. So you see the arrow that shows you how to do that. And it's here. I will circle that right now over here. So that's where you make your little sticky notes to create. Or if you're feeling particularly creative, you can click on this icon and upload an image from your computer into the Jamboard space to illustrate the concept that you're trying to get across. All right, so let's put the link to the Jamboards into the chat, please. Over there at tinyurl.com/civic. There you go. All right. So are there any questions before we send you off into small group land? No, everybody looks like they are good to go. All right, then. Please send us into small groups.
Okay, and it looks like we have enough, so we're going to open up 5 different groups. So we're going to be a little, we're not going to be perfectly symmetrical here,
Okay.
but it'll be 5 groups, or 5 groups of 5 each. All right, here we go.
Welcome back, everybody. I could feel this. I could feel the energy. I could feel the energy from your breakout groups bursting through my computer here. I got all tingly. So I looked at the Jamboards and they were starting to fill up with some great stuff. So even now, as the workshop proceeds, if you get new thoughts or you want to elaborate, please return to your home Jamboard, the Jamboard of your group, and you can still add to it by all means. Okay. So I think we had 5 groups all together. That was right.
Yes.
So we will take them in order, starting with group 1. Each group should have a reporter, someone who will report back, and you will have 3 minutes to share. And after that person is done sharing, then the other members of the group can feel free to chime in if you want to add, elaborate, or amend. All right, starting with group 1, which was Hart. What do you got? Unmute and report. Someone from group 1.
Hold on, I had someone. That's my group. Hold on, I had someone.
Okay.
I believe our reporter is experiencing some internet issues.
Okay.
So
You can just
that is why we have the delay.
Well, jump in until they're with us.
Regina, you
Okay,
have muted yourself.
So, I know. I have figured it out now. So when we talk about the civic heart, essentially our group came to talk about this idea of morals. And on our Jamboard, we mentioned when we think of civic action, we think of what's right and what's wrong. Another great discussant said that you can't make good civic decisions until it passes this moral trek, which I thought was very interesting. And when we think about, hold on, that was pretty much it, honestly.
Well,
That's pretty-
that's good, but what do you mean? But what's the moral test? What is, by what criteria will be something judged, in your opinion, morally right?
Okay, since I said it, I think it's best that I explain it.
Yes.
A moral trek, because your morals, at least I think that this is the way it goes in most people. Your morals influence your mind, and then your mind influences your muscles to make the decision that your mind made. So when you go on a moral trek of doing something, like most moral decisions are made in split-second time, and we don't really think about it. It just kind of happens. But in order for something to pass your morals, it's something in regard to what you think is right or wrong. So, for instance, I'll go all the way back. This is a great civic example with FDR's New Deal and how it helped out so many Americans during the Great Depression. And like, in order, in FDR's case, FDR had to weigh the pros and cons of it, and he had to make the moral decision as to whether or not it was right or wrong to do it. And then very clearly it passed his heart that it was the right thing to do for the good of America.
Okay, so let's hear from some other people on the group. What would be another test of something being morally right? So what I just got from that is, if something helps a lot of people, that seems to be morally good. That's what I got from what you just said.
Oh, I thought of it
Please add.
differently.
Go ahead.
I thought of it more of like, if I have a different background, I would think some things are right, while others who have different experiences think that's wrong. Or yeah, like my experiences influence what I think. So it's not necessarily what helps people the most.
Okay. Besides this issue of morality, what other mindsets or what kind of heart do we need to be a great person in civics, to be very present in civics? Give me something else.
I'm not in this group, but I think an open heart would help a lot. And I don't know if they said this because my internet was popping in and out, but an open heart, an open mind. If you're not open-minded, then you're not gonna understand other people's point of views.
Okay, can you elaborate? How do you know someone has an open heart? What are they doing that shows that to you?
I think when they're listening and understanding other people's point of views, taking the time to research views that are not necessarily their own, if they're educated in general.
Well, the first thing you said is listening.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on what kind of listening do you think is required here?
Just taking the time to hear out other people's opinions in general.
What about the word empathy? Is that a good word for what you're saying?
I think so. But it doesn't necessarily have to do in general with emotion.
No.
I think it has a little bit, but not too much with emotion. I think it's just, being educated plays an important role.
Okay. So if I'm empathetic to you, how am I showing that? What does that mean? I'm empathetic means what?
You would be listening, you'd be caring, you'd be, I see your point. It does play a role. But in my point of view, I was seeing it as just a person being, you know, educated. You don't have to like a person in order to be open-minded. You know, you just have to be, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I accept those. Great. So we're getting and adding things in the chat. I see it's good. These are good.
What I think it is to be open-minded and open-hearted, I don't necessarily think you have to be educated, but I think it depends on your background. I think that your background plays into it, because I think someone that came from nothing and fought and scratched and clawed their way out of that nothingness into something has an open mind and an open heart and the empathy of realizing that they could lose it all in an instant. And so then they look at all these other perspectives and all these other points of view, and they realize that they need to take bits from all these other points of view and kind of intermingle it into their own to get the best possible point of view, to get the best possible point, or to make the best possible step forward.
Got it. Yes, I agree. I put that into chat. Okay, great start, group one. Woo! I'm giving you thumbs up, group one. It's always tough to be the first one to go. Okay, group two is your civic brain. Group two, what do you got?
So for the first few minutes, we did have a bit of a struggle because unfortunately, most of my group members weren't able to access the board. So with the time we had, I did as much as I could to put as much as what we were talking about on the board.
Thank you.
So some of the things we talked about was like know how to vote, critical thinking, memory, having an understanding of the topic, having new experiences to gather that knowledge and area of that topic, as well as always asking questions, and finally developing communication skills.
Whoa. Wow, that is a great list. So let's start with your first thing that you said, voting.
Yes.
That's also something that will probably come up in the third group or group that talks about actions. You know, that's usually a behavior that's informed by knowledge. So it's going to find it in both camps. So what I interpret that to mean is you got to know who you're voting for, or you have to know the issues in order to be a good voter. But the act of voting we would find that in the third camp, but they're kind of connected. So voting is always in this conversation, and I've done this workshop like a dozen times. Critical thinking is a great one. Can you explain what you mean by critical thinking? A critical thinker is somebody who does what?
Well, we definitely, when we read a text, we definitely want to dig a little deeper into it. Maybe there's something a little more to it. Maybe it could be for my instance, I mean, like during my English class last semester, we did a lot of reports of like speeches from like the president, and obviously, you know, some people might not understand it, while others can definitely dig a little deeper to that text and find a better understanding of what exactly the president or whoever is trying to get to, basically trying to, like, the point they're trying to make across.
Right. So critical thinking is having a bit of a skeptical lens, and you're asking a couple of questions about messages that are coming to you. Whatever the source, you're asking who is sending the message, who is really sending the message. And sometimes on the internet, it's actually hard to know that, isn't it? But you also want to know for whom is this message intended, and what is the expected outcome from sending this message. So a lot of times messages are being sent to you, oh person, oh civic person, oh student, because someone wants you to do something, right? What do they want you to do? What are some of the things that a message sender may want you to do?
Extend the warranty on my vehicle.
Yeah, they want you to buy something.
I was gonna say, like, buy something or spread the word around about something.
Yeah, spread the word. Buy something which is helping sell something. And it doesn't have to be a thing, it could be an idea too, right? Spread a message. Give time or money, right? And these messages are coming to you all the time. Certainly they're coming to you from commercial interests who want you to buy something, and they're going to make it sexy. So, you know, buy these sneakers and you'll be like Mikey, right? Well, not in the pig's eye. I don't care how many sneakers you buy. You'll never be like Mike Jordan, but they want you to buy those sneakers, or drink this cognac and you'll be like DMX or Snoop Doggy Dogg or whatever popular figure that might excite you. You know what I'm saying? Well, don't believe that. But also, people in civics are going to send you messages as well, and you got to be critical. So that's huge. We could probably spend the rest of the time together just breaking that down. That was great. That was really super. And then group 2, you said communication skills. Why is that in there?
Well, personally for me, developing communication skills is something very important, because without communicating, how are we really speaking to each other? How will we know what we're thinking, what we want to talk about?
Yes. So it seems such a simple thing to say, and yet it is super important in this work. So when we do this work together, my friends, we are not shy. You may be a shy person in your house with your family, like you're not the one who speaks out. You could be the quiet one, but in this work together, we must speak out. You must be able to speak in public. You must be able to be in a small group and have your voice heard, and not always be the one who's quiet. It doesn't mean that you are an obnoxious person or an abrasive person, but to speak out is often very difficult for many people. And if English is not your first language, well, that's also a difficulty. I know in America, this is there's an English first mentality here. We're not really great with other languages, and that's not a good thing, but that is kind of real. So being able to be a good communicator and what we call a persuasive communicator is very, very important. So it's not like you're trying to argue someone to death and to be too smart and put people down or anything like that, or use your sarcasm, because some people are very good about that. They have a very fast wit. That's not what we're talking about. But to be a passionate communicator. Oh, and look, I just used one of my favorite words that we somehow missed. So let me digress for a minute. Why is passion in this conversation?
Is that because, like, when it comes to getting involved, obviously that more often than not, it comes from a place of a place close to you, that you're getting involved because this is something that's impacting you, or that made you feel or that shook you so much that you feel like you have to do something about it.
Yes, that is such a great observation that we'll hold on to that for a minute.
I think that being a passionate speaker aids a lot in being a persuasive speaker, because when you have passion and you're really fired up about something and you care about something, it's a lot easier to get other people to see your perspective and want to do what you want, because they see that you genuinely care about it. And the way that my current English teacher would talk about, you have to be very rhetorically sound to be a good, passionate, persuasive speaker.
Got it. Super. Really, really cool. Right on the bullseye. So we could do a whole separate class just in civic communications, in person and online, in written form and in video form. But let's just say for now that you guys hit a really strong point there with this idea of passionate or authentic. I'll put that in the chat. Authentic communicator. Okay, super. That's awesome. Group 3. Moving on. 3 is skills or behaviors. What do you got? Group 3. Anybody from group 3?
Knowing how to
One
organize
of the,
was, oh,
sorry. Well, we didn't pick a speaker, but I was just gonna bring up one of the points that I brought up was that just knowing how to contact like your local representatives and knowing like being outgoing and knowing when there's an issue and when like you can actually contact them and try to come to a solution.
Right. So you jumped a step there, which I'm assuming, and that is you have to know who your elected officials are. So I'm going to assume that everyone on this call knows who their alderman is, and I believe we have an alderman, councilman on the line right now. Rob Pabon, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Hey, Rob, I'm sorry, I meant to introduce you. We have someone who is not a student, but tell us a little about yourself, Rob.
Yeah, so my name is Rob Pabon. I am currently the 5th Ward Alderman-elect in Berwyn. Ran a campaign based on centering community and progressive politics. Got my start in community work as an organizer. But as many of you are studying right now, civic engagement, definitely got my roots and understanding of how to organize, build power and create change while I was in college at DePaul. So really excited to be here today to hear from you all and understand and learn what your definitions of civic engagement are and how you're getting involved. But definitely, to your point, Tom, knowing who to target in terms of how you move people is a really important part of civic engagement. And that's, knowing all the players, knowing people who are either in office or who hold power, or who are in community that you could build with to create change is a really important part of taking that action.
Great. And if you want to put your contact information in the chat, Rob, maybe you'll have some interns show up. Who knows? So what he said is very
I would love that.
He said, knowing who the players are. So that is what I call the context. So I just said before, like you have to know who your elected officials are. So you were saying know how to contact them. So yes, so you know who they are, but then how do you reach them? Do you know what their phone numbers are? Do you know where their offices are? Do you know what is the manner in which you reach out to an elected official to get a meeting with them? And then if you have a meeting, do you know how to run a meeting? How would you prepare? So you see, by saying that little thing, you really opened up quite a big box of civic content, because it implies that you not only know who the elected official is, but you have to know about them. Like, where do they stand? Are they a good representative for you? Or are they not doing a good job for you? Do they take positions that you agree with or disagree with? Well, how do you know that? Where do you find that? And that's part of the things that you have to know. So please put into chat right now suggestions on how you would have to know if Rob Pabon was, say, your alderman. How would you find out about him? How would you know if he was doing a good job or not? Put it in the chat. There he is. Thank you, Rob. He's put his contact information in the chat for you. This is a huge opportunity, people. This guy's going places. He's doing some good work. You want to get on board the Pabon train? Help him out on the work that he's doing in grassroots democracy in Berwyn, Illinois. But to the point, how do you find out about an elected official? Where would you go? Hey, there you go. Someone put in Ballotopedia, an awesome source. And you can imagine other things. So you can put that into chat. So, okay. What other things, back to my reporter from group 3, what other things do we have to know how to do? What other skills? Or behaviors?
You could always check like different, or I'm not in this group, but one thing that I thought of was like, you could always look up them on Google just to see like,
Yeah.
what are some of the stories that come up with when you Google them.
Yep. So I put into chat the ability to research. So you have to be a learner. So that you could say is also a mindset that we might have put into our earlier discussion, but the ability to use these tools, whatever they might be. So you can put into chat now other online tools that one could use to learn about not just the elected officials, but issues in general. So you already said Google, so don't put Google in there. But what databases do you have access to as students, and also if you were just going to the public library? So how do you learn about these issues? And of course, you follow the news. You can watch CNN. Obviously, that could be something. Yeah, JSTOR, right? These are databases, right, of articles and so forth. So back to, all right. So this is good. A good work. Each bucket has been reported on. So now let's circle back and cover some of the same ground, but that's okay. We can add and elaborate. Group 4 is back to the heart. So group 4, please add or embellish or give us some new thoughts about this idea of the civic heart. Group 4.
Okay, so I'll start off. The first thing we were talking about is perseverance. It is hard work, so there's going to be conflict that you might run into. So you just have to know how to push through and get through it so that you can reach the outcome that you want, so you can reach your goals.
Right. So if someone is persevering, what are they doing? How you sort of started that, but give me some more meat. How do you know someone is really a good perseverer, someone who's not going to say no, give up? What do they do?
Someone who looks for more than one solution, or who plans ahead, or doesn't really let anything get in their way if they believe that their goal or the outcome is important enough to them.
Wow. Yeah, I'm going to say walks through walls as a shorthand. Yeah. So this perseverance that you mentioned is very true. That's sort of someone has a good willpower. Or you could say they have focus, right? And they stick to itness. And that's tied to the passion, right? That you just mentioned a few minutes ago. Someone mentioned passion. So someone who is passionate about a topic or an issue is not going to give up easily or be easily defeated when an obstacle is in their way, right? So you are not easily defeated, right? And why is that critical to this work? Why is that such an important thing to notice?
I think part of that would be because of, at times, being civically involved is a bit of a thankless job. And you're not always going to get what you want. So you have to kind of pick and choose what battles you actually want to try to win, because it's like, okay, you're getting somewhat of what you wanted to get, but you know that if you keep asking for more, they're just going to say no. So you kind of got to realize that you got to that it's not, you can't always get everything right away, but you
Yes.
hope that you can work towards getting what you want.
Right. So being in civics, being a change maker is not a sprint. It is a marathon for which one trains. So you wouldn't pretend to try to go into the Chicago Marathon and run the 30 miles without being trained. That would be stupid. And nor would we want to get you engaged in the civic marathon without being trained and having your muscles toned and your mind sharp for the fight ahead. And that is why classes like this that you're doing with Professor is really important for you guys to choose to learn to build your civic muscles and your civic brains and to expand your civic hearts. As you prepare to do this work is an intentional choice on your part, and it is needed in the United States of America right now, ladies and gentlemen, so much, my friends. We need to go into the civic arena prepared, with our civic muscles strong and our civic lungs full of good civic oxygen for this fight. Because you know what? If it was easy, it would have been done already. So yes, power doesn't like to give up easily. So when you see injustice in the world or things you want to change and make better, it requires work. So this is why we say civics is a full contact sport, not for the armchair. So if you were in the impression that you could sort of do this from the living room, even under COVID, we're out there, we still get out and we still do things. What we're doing here today, is really important because we're engaging with each other. But if we were in a classroom, it would be better because we could see each other and it would be a little fresher. But still, we're doing good work here today because we're reaching out from our isolation where we are in our homes. So critical. Okay, that's awesome. Group 4. So I think we have only one more group, I believe. Group 5, which was also the brain. So group 5, can you please report in what you got?
Yeah, so I think something that I just came up with while you guys were talking with this last group, and I think that's probably the biggest thing that anybody should know in not only civic engagement but in any area of life, is that change is always possible. If you're optimistic for change to happen, then that's how you gain the power that Rob was talking about. He was in our group, and I thought him talking about you need to have power for maybe your protest or something like that. It has to have power to have its legs. It has to have passionate people that give it that power. So I thought that was probably we had some other really good points here, but I thought to start off, that was probably the most important thing for me, is just being optimistic about change. Because if you have a very pessimistic view of what you can do as an individual, then things will kind of just stay the same. And a lot of these problems that we face in in Chicago and the United States and the world, really, it's just going to stay the same.
That is super, super important. So we're sort of bridging a couple of the groups here. Optimism is a feeling of the heart, but it's also something you can learn. And again, can I persuade someone to be optimistic? Can I persuade someone to be generous? That's another thing that I would say we need to be generous. To be a giving person is required of this work. But you have to believe, and this again is a mindset and a skill set, you have to believe that you can make a difference. Mm-hmm. And so doing the research, which again now is in group 2, to find the stories, or the ability to tell your own story to influence others, is how we get the optimism. So that, again, now we blend back into the skill set. So to tell a story about your own situation, how you overcame a challenge, is inspiring to other people. So now you're communicating. Back to group 2, skill sets. You see how these things tend to bleed a little bit into one another. So if you do believe, if you are an optimistic person, and I say you're unrealistically optimistic, I use that term by design. We say organizers are unrealistically optimistic. They have what we call a double or blurred vision. That is, you see the world as it is, right? With its imperfections and injustice. At the same time, right, you see the world as it should be. That's a double blurred vision. And you don't let the first interfere with the second. It triggers the second. It could be a very horrible situation that you're observing or living through or being aware of. But at the same time, the organizer and the change maker says, that's not right. That sucks. Why can't we have it this way? And then they say something. It's another way of being. It's the other, it's a better world. And that's something could be informed by their personal experience because they saw something in another jurisdiction. They want to bring it here, or they read about it, or they just imagined it. And they say, I see the bad thing happening, but at the same time, I see the way things should be. And now I'm going to work to make that happen. I'm going to work to make my vision, which is a fantasy right now, overlay and replace the actual reality. That is what we're talking about, right? So that's why this is not a sprint. What I just told you could take years. Movements take years or decades, but it all starts with people like you on this call with big hearts, building your civic brains and exercising your civic muscles collectively. That's the other great word that you guys just used, collective power. This is not Tom Tresser by myself. This is not Rob by himself or Elizabeth by herself or anybody by themselves. This is what we work together. Absolutely. Okay, before we move on to the presentation, does anybody want to add anything, tie anything together, or other comments? This is beautiful stuff.
I'd like to add something, Tom, if that's okay, real quick.
Please.
So I think one thing that I've learned around civic engagement and just getting more involved is just understanding the difference between having an individual framework and a systems framework. And I think what I mean by that is a lot of times we're socialized, especially in this country, to think of issues on an individual level. You know, Tom is impacted by this, I'm impacted by that. Tony is dealing with this issue. But the issues that we're facing, especially around economic and racial issues, many times are systemic, right? There's systemic problems, and because we have systemic problems, we need systemic solutions. And so just moving from having an individual mindset of, you know, that one person or that one family is experiencing food insecurity or homelessness, to why does homelessness even exist? Why are families, or why are some people food insecure when we have so much, we have an abundance, is a transition that I think is really important to the civic mindset, like understanding what the systemic issues are and how these are systemic problems, not individual people's problems.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that is super critical, and it's a mindset and a skill set. So we all will feel in our early lives individual hurts because we haven't been schooled in these things. It's who's teaching us to think like this, you know, which is another question. But the way people come into this work is usually they feel or experience individual hurts, or they observe harm. And the question is it just me? Like, did the cops pull me over because I'm a bad driver, or because I'm a person of color and there's some racism going on here? Well, you may not know that until it happens to you, and then you learn a little bit about the context. So someone has to tell you, you have to teach yourself a little bit about the context. And that means you have to know your history. And sometimes that means going outside of the history books, because there's something called the cycle of socialization that leads to the cycle of liberation. And I don't have time to go into that today, but perhaps if this group is interested, and we can have a return visit and talk about those two cycles, because part of what Rob is pointing out is, if you're inside an educational system that's oppressive and based on capitalism and based on you being a good consumer, the system may not want to actually teach you these skills. The system may actually want you to be a quiet consumer and just shut up and play Farmville and buy that cognac.
Very, very, very similarly, Tom, because you said that you had to go outside the history books, especially to get different perspectives. And am I a bad driver? Is it because I'm a person of color, et cetera, et cetera? That brings the all too real statement of "to the victor go the spoils," because the winner writes the history book. That's the fact of it. But also, like Rob was saying, how and especially in society today, we look at problems far too much on an individual scale instead of on a systematic scale. Because the fact of the matter is that one person can create change, but in order for that one person to create change, they have to have a system in place to make that change come to fruition. Because one person can only do so much on their own.
Yes. Right. And so we don't have time to go into this, but it's a good note to take, that to teach the art and science of organizing. So that's not what we're doing here today, but I have taught organizing for many years. And that is a class that we can offer. I mean, if that's something that St. Xavier wants to do, we can actually have a class on how to be a community organizer. And, there are skills, resources, maps, exercises, tools, methods, if you want, that organizers have been using for decades. And Chicago is sort of the home of modern community organizing. So we have a ton of people here, ton of people. Oh, and someone just put in a very good observation: stop thinking about how to fix the symptoms and start thinking about how to fix the disease. Yes, I'll put in that root causes is part of this systems thinking. Absolutely. All right. I think we have covered a lot of good ground. This is excellent work, you all. I'm going to save the chat when we're done in a few minutes and send it to the professor. So you can also save the chat for yourselves and keep these good notes. But now let's continue on. I will give you my definition of civic engagement. It's very simple. It's public work for the common good. So, and that covers everything we've talked about. So if you're doing public work for the common good, you are engaged in civics. Now, some of the things that were mentioned have metrics behind it. So let's take a look now with these next few slides at some metrics about some of these behaviors and some of these activities. So one of the first things that was mentioned is voting. That is usually the number one thing that people think about in this space of civics, but think about all the other things we talked about. Voting was just a tiny little piece of it. I think that's a very big learning for you in this workshop. Okay, so how are we doing in voting? Well, guess what? Not so great. So in the 2016 presidential election, we had 61% of the voters who could vote voting. So that's rotten. That was in 2016 when it was a pretty important election. But now what happens? If you look at by the age groups, again, we're looking back in time. The age group of the 18 to 29-year-olds, of which most of you, it's worse. 46% of you guys voted. And there's a lot of research about why that is. I hear a lot of talk about, well, I'm working, I didn't know how to register, or I didn't know how to, I was out of school, or I was out of the state, all kinds of reasons. But often the real reason is that the person just doesn't give a crap. It hasn't been made real. Now that could be for a number of reasons. They could honestly believe that their vote doesn't matter. So that's a cynical person. And we just said that cynicism isn't going to fly here. You've got to be optimistic. You have to be unrealistic optimistic. So if you just say, oh, I'm just one person, that's a cop out. I don't want to hear anybody with that excuse. But it's also true that in certain places, they're making it hard for you to vote. In some places now, they're making it with an ID. In some places, there's no early voting. Illinois, however, has made it very easy to vote. So then remains the question, why haven't we made the sale? So a lot of young people simply are not voting. And I'll leave that for you guys to noodle about as a challenge. Can you help figure that out as you move forward in your life? Yeah, Rob says, he put it in the chat, he won by 17 votes. Don't tell him that votes don't count. 17 people, truly. And that's going to happen a lot of times in these small races. So Rob is a city councilman in a modest town-sized city, a municipality. And most of the elections in America are at that level, school board, library board, city councilor, where there's only a few thousand voters, in the jurisdiction. Okay, so we really try to get that line up there from the 46%. We really want to get that up to 80%. Come on, let's shoot big. Okay. Now, things changed around a little bit in 2020. We had the highest turnout of eligible voters in 100 years. And that is from America Goes to the Polls. That link is in the chat. And so you can see that little chart. Every state increased their turnout from the 4 years before. Over almost 160 million votes were cast. That's great. That's great news. That's very good. But we're still only at 67%. Oh my goodness. So it means like 23% of voters still stayed home. Biden versus Biden versus Trump, and still 23% of the people said, I don't care, whatever. For the first time in recent history, 20 states had higher voter turnout than 70%. And the champion from the 2020 vote was Minnesota with 80%. Well, if you look at the reasons, it's because Minnesota has put into some practices that make it easy to vote. So good on them. We like Minnesota. However, Illinois is kind of sucky and is just number 28 in the state roll call from 2020. So Illinois has a long way to go to get to 80%, to beat our brothers and sisters over in Minnesota. But the other good news is it's young people who elected Joe Biden president of the United States. So give yourselves a pat on the back if that's a good turnout. So in Arizona, the youth vote was overwhelmingly for Biden, almost by 100%. Same for Georgia, for Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Those 4 states were critical in delivering the Electoral College votes to Joe Biden to make him our current president. So the young people in those 4 states really stepped up, and their voice is reverberating throughout the land. So good for them. In Chicago, sadly, it's the worst of the worst. In our mayoral election from 2019, in the first general election, only 35% of the people voted. That is so sad. It makes me cry. I mean, Chicago, which is a rough and tumble town, full of problems, full of great people, great neighborhoods, 64%, 65% of the people stayed home and did not vote for mayor or alderman in February of 2019. And it got worse in the runoff between I think there were 10 alderman runoffs, but the big ticket was Cook County President Tony Preckwinkle versus Lori Lightfoot. Now, Lori Lightfoot ended up winning every single ward, all 50 wards, but it's a pathetic turnout. So there you have 68% of the voters stayed out of the election. I can't figure it out. It could be, again, that people are so disgusted with corruption in this city that they just feel dirty voting, or they feel that it's a waste of time. I don't know. I really don't really have a solid answer for you, but that is totally not acceptable. Other measures of civic behavior would be volunteering. So if you're a volunteer, please put it in the chat now. What do you volunteer for? And of course, volunteering means that you're donating your time to some organization or cause. It could be a cause, or it could be, a charity, or it could be a sports group. Like you could be a coach, a volunteer coach for a sports group. You could be a volunteer deacon at your house of worship. You could be someone who helped clean up a vacant lot. So if you've done some volunteer work, I want to see it in the chat. Put it in the chat. What have you volunteered for? And even though you're students and maybe come from families of modest means, I know certainly that was my story. You can still find a chance to volunteer, and even do it online. So people are starting to put things in the chat. Please put into chat things that you volunteered for. Great. And you can see that the national rate in America, even though it's quite a few people, 63 million, it's only 25% of Americans. So we have a long way to go. So there's a lot more on the table, so to speak, for our country. And in Chicago, again, it's not a lot to brag about. Maybe 26% of all Chicagoans are volunteer. We're 39th amongst big US cities. So Rob put something in the chat. That's great. Thank you. You can click on that link and be matched with things that you can volunteer for. And I encourage you to do it. Even if you volunteer an hour or two a week, you're going to, again, we're going to get out of COVID soon. And it's a way to expand your horizons, meet new people, and to be shellfish about it, sometimes it actually leads to employment. So many times, if you love a group and you volunteer for them and you just love to be there and help them, that people pick up on it. And many times organizations will actually hire some of their best volunteers because they know you and you know them. So there's a lot of reasons to volunteer. But we have a long way to go. Illinois is 31st amongst the 50 states. So again, I would not say that we are a very generous state or a very generous city. The other measure of civic behavior that you did not mention is donating money. So donating time and money is a civic behavior. Now, guess who's going to ask you for money as soon as you graduate? Anybody want to guess or put it in the chat? As soon as you graduate St. Xavier, who's going to ask you for money? St. Xavier, yes, of course they're going to ask you for money. And I hope that you will listen and give what you can to keep the university running. But in America, in 2018, donations to nonprofits such as St. Xavier's was almost $428 billion. So in that sense, we are somewhat of a generous country. That's a lot of money. And individuals gave 68% of that. So that is to say, individual people from their own pockets gave $292 billion in 2018. That is unique in countries. That's very quite a lot of money, and you can see the breakdown. Foundations gave about 76 billion. Bequests, that is to say through wills, which is another way to talk about individuals really, is about 40 billion. And then corporations have charitable programs where they give money as well. Now, where did that money go to? They go to groups like education, like the arts, like the zoo, like churches. Churches is a big recipient of donations. So finally, as we near the end of our time together, how does America stack up in some of these civic behaviors? Well, in terms of global participation in voter registration, we're kind of mediocre. We're only number 26. So we're way down the list. Someone put in a chat, what about people thinking that they should not volunteer because it doesn't pay or they're too busy? Well, yes, volunteerism doesn't pay. That's the definitions of volunteerism. Back to your heart. That goes back to the very first thing we were talking about. If you're not a generous person, you're not to get involved in civics. So there's got to be some generosity at the bottom of this. And it may manifest itself as a volunteer, but even if you're not going to go to the food bank and help serve meals, getting engaged in civic work is you're still volunteering. You're still doing unpaid work to make society better. That is true for everything we're talking about. Bottom line here, when we look at voting, the United States has a long way to go to catch up with Belgium, who's almost got a 90% participation for their elections. Long way to go. And finally, look at these other measures of civic behavior. Most likely to volunteer time, the United States is number 9. Indonesia is the number 1 there. Most likely to donate money to a charity, Myanmar, or used to be called Burma, again, followed by Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand. So even though we give a lot of money in terms of this percentage of people that are likely to give, we're still have a way to go. And most likely to help a stranger. Again, the United States, way at the bottom. Libya, from 2017, number 1, followed by Iraq, Kuwait, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Bahrain, and you can see these other countries. Okay. So the numbers would suggest that the United States is not a global leader in generosity. All right, my friends. Now, for our conclusion, I want everyone to think about everything we just said. All the topics, the muscles, if you will, the skills, and think of one word that's the number 1 thing that we need to make ourselves powerful civic players, to be especially at St. Xavier. So I want you to go to to that link that's in chat, and you'll be invited to put in a word at that Mentimeter tool. And I see words are starting to pop in. Great. So let's see what the group mind has to say. The one word. So pick the one word from all the things that we were talking about. Great. You guys are getting the hang of this. That's so cool. Yeah. Student. Someone was cheating and put in student leaders. That's okay. We get you. Super. Yeah. Keep putting in the words. Nice. Yeah, let's make sure everybody's in there. Keep going. Yeah, good. Optimism seems to jump out. That's nice. Okay. Everybody put something in the chat. I mean, put something into the Mentimeter. Thumbs up. Thumbs up if you did. Great. All right. Well, you can still do that for the next few minutes. If something occurs to you, that would be awesome. And I'll go back and share the screen again. You see how the screen is filled up with your thoughts. And optimism is right up there along with empathy, which I think are two powerful words. So going back to the presentation, we'll just conclude here. I hope this has been instructive to you all. And maybe it will give the St. Xavier colleagues something to think about as to how to build one or two of those muscles from the word cloud. How would you go about building a civic gym for yourselves at the school? What activities could you do as a club or as a group of people when we're out of COVID, that you could come together either to teach yourselves or to be in action? Think of it like you were going to the gym to build a muscle, intentionally. How would you build your civic muscles? That concludes my presentation, folks. I hand it back to Elizabeth.
All right, Tom, thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about. Before we close out today, I do want to make one quick announcement. Tomorrow, please, if you have time, join us at 6:30. We are celebrating, well, the politics and film course and the political science forum are hosting a viewing party to celebrate Rex Manning Day. So we will be showing Empire Records. So please join us if you can. I will put that in the chat box and I hope to see you there. Aside from that, thank you all so much for joining us today and keep thinking civically.
All right, everybody. Thank you for participating. This was an awesome conversation. I really appreciate you all to join us and to share your civic thoughts. Go out and make something happen, my good friends. And with that, let's all be well and safe.
Thank you.